Chris O'Connor here. Join the Curmudgeon Rock Report's invite-only curmudgeonly community at facebook.com/curmudgeonrock. Also look out for a Spotify playlist that pays honor to this episode.
This is the Curmudgeon Rock Report, and this is your podcast made by rock geek iconoclastic outsiders for rock geek iconoclastic outsiders. For those of you who lament that rock music has gone the way of jazz and slipped into niche genre status, we are here to keep that flame alive by providing insight, analysis, recommendations, and honest takes, not hot takes. And hey, there's a good chance you'll learn some rock history you never knew before. In the early 1980s, the sounds of hardcore punk defined the American underground rock scene. Not only did it do that, but the ideology of hardcore punk empowered young bands and artists to form a nationwide network of concert venues, independent fanzines, and independent record labels that pumped life and blood into the indie underground to the point that the scene was a viable alternative to the staid, bland, soulless music that made up the majority of what major record labels were putting out at this time. One of the defining and key U.S. hardcore punk bands during this time was Minor Threat, fronted by Ian MacKaye, whose arguably biggest contribution to the Washington, D.C. music scene that birthed Minor Threat was the creation of the legendary independent record label Dischord Records. Still existing to this day, MacKaye's Dischord label in the 1980s was a bastion of anti-corporate, anti-commercial integrity that released music by bands and artists from all across the indie alternative rock spectrum. After Minor Threat disbanded in 1983, it seemed that running Dischord would be MacKaye's true calling. The fact was that MacKaye bided his time, and when he did form a new band by the end of the 1980s, what was unleashed on the world was perhaps the most singularly, endearingly, uncompromisingly anti-commercial, anti-corporate rock band in history. Fugazi didn't make videos or singles and refused to sign to a major label no matter what. They managed themselves, they did their own publicity, they booked all their shows and tours themselves, they acted as their own road crew, they mostly played venues that had nothing to do with corporate ticketing agencies, and they insisted that all their shows were for all ages audiences while capping all ticket prices at under $10. They were a paragon of truly indie virtue, and their socio-political activism was an inspiration in their time and for every generation of indie rock lovers and fans up to this day. Of course, none of this would have resonated as much if their brand of fierce, passionate, innovative, post-hardcore rock didn't make such a massive musical impact and have an influence on countless ensuing generations of bands and artists. So, let's jump into the brilliant discography and career of Fugazi, one of rock history's most fascinating and inspirational bands. And welcome to the Curmudgeon Rock Report.
Yeah, so Art, this week, I was thinking, it's kind of coincidental. So we're doing this episode on Fugazi, who are, kind of the indie DIY superheroes of all time in underground rock in America. And I was flipping around on Twitter, and I saw an item from a writer that I really respect and admire, Stephen Hyden, and he posted something that he got from one of the ticket sites. I don't know if it was StubHub or one of these, but basically on the secondary market right now, tickets to see the band Geese, who we covered a couple episodes back in the Parallel Universe and who you and I both like. You want tickets for Geese were going for $1,100 on the secondary market.
That's a scalpers, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's like the ticket resale market. Yeah. Where they scoop them up and then jack the prices up. But $1,100 listed ticket price for Geese, who are still playing theaters. and
Or
probably
small theaters. Small theaters in big cities. Most cities and areas, they're still playing clubs.
yeah, it's clubs, and you're talking about like theaters. Like they might have made their way into Terminal 5 by now in New York City,
Yeah, sure.
or like the Metro in DC.
Yeah, 3,000 capacity venues, basically, two to three
Yeah,
thousand.
1,000 to 3,000 capacity venues. But so for a band at that level, $1,100, that's like Taylor Swift cheap
I
seats.
know. I know.
And so that's just insane. This is how bad things have gotten. I mean, when Pearl Jam, excuse me, decided to have their fight with Ticketmaster, at that point, the tickets were like, with the fees added, we're still talking between 40 and $50.
Right.
Which right now, hey, if I could find a decent ticket for $40, I'll take it. You know? And so that's what the fight was over with Ticketmaster. And so now that you're getting these four figures, it's absolutely fucking insane. And it just shows you that like basically most of America is getting priced out from
Yeah.
having a life of any kind. I mean,
Yeah.
even in other entertainment forms, we're both wrestling fans. WrestleMania, the cheapest ticket for next year's WrestleMania is $854.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
there was a survey, a study that I read about that like roughly like 70% of Americans like prefer to stay in now instead of going
yeah.
out because shit's expensive.
Yeah, it is. I
Shit's
mean, my wife,
expensive.
my wife and I did a minor league baseball game. It cost between the two of us, we spent like $130.
I know. I mean, it's just
I mean that used to be the greatest cheap ticket in town.
the co the
The
yeah.
tickets cost like $10. The beers cost like $2. The hot dogs cost like $3. I mean
Yeah.
that was a great cheap ticket. Now it's as expensive as anything else. Going to the fucking movies, like even matinee prices. I went and saw one battle after another, and on a Sunday matinee, the ticket price was $12.
Yeah.
I went to get some Twizzlers and they were 6.50. And so it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, it is expensive as shit to do anything. And so, people have the nerve to wonder why the business is down in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shit's expensive. The cost of living has gone way up, and people's wages haven't risen enough to match it. And it's not
Yeah.
just cost of living, it's cost of entertainment. Cost of
Yeah.
living and entertainment have gone up.
Cost of entertainment. Yeah, the cost of living is one thing, like beef being like a pound of ground beef in my local supermarket's up to $8.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But talk about Vegas. Vegas has two problems right now. What foreigners want to travel to America right now, given
Yeah.
all the craziness going on with Stephen Miller and all these other fucking assholes in the
Yeah.
government. And then, yeah, 22-year-old kids are going to go to Vegas. Oh yeah, we're going to spend we're going to spend $1,200 to see Don Rickles or whoever the new Don
Don
Rickles
Rickles
is.
died a while back.
Yeah, I know, but whoever the new Don Rickles is in Vegas, whoever that person might be, oh, we're going
Yeah.
to spend $1,200 for that. Oh yeah, and we're going to spend $800 a night on a hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
don't think
and
that's
and
necessarily going to work.
and this is why people like Zoran Mamdani are becoming successful.
Yeah, because they're
like
focused on affordability.
yeah, like make shit cheaper for the people. That's a very great political platform that anyone can get behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now that health insurance premiums are going to go up by like
Yeah.
double for a lot of
Yeah.
Obamacare
Right.
recipients. So,
Right.
yeah. Well, but anyway, yeah. So this just this I figured this would be a good starter conversation to relay how much of a hero Ian MacKaye was
Yeah.
back in the day, and how much of a kind of a legendary figure he is hovering over all of this sort of lost integrity
Sure.
that we're seeing in the country right now. So, with that, that's just a little bit of a morsel, a taste of what's to come. But first, as we always do, it's time to rip the asshole out of the space-time continuum and go up the sphincter and join the parallel universe. Ew.
Ooh, I hear the noise. Ooh, yeah, we're
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I made a shit metaphor, but ain't no shit in the parallel universe. It's all golden, baby.
Right.
Like I said, it's an awesome place over there. Rock and roll is still predominant. It never faded away. Big guitars and rock stars in tight pants and no shirts parading around the stage like lurking tigers is still the thing. And cowbell, more cowbell and more cowbell and more cowbell is awesome. And again, everything's on the radio and it's in Rolling Stone, and there's a vitality to the rock that never died. Long way of saying this is the segment of the show that we cover new and newish artists that we think that you would dig and that we're digging and that we think that you ought to check out, because in a fair world and in a parallel universe, these bands would be starring and would be a big deal, and and actually deserve to charge $1,100. So, with that said, Arturo, who are you covering in this edition of the Parallel Universe?
Yeah. Critically acclaimed Burlington, Vermont-based singer-songwriter Greg Freeman released his second album, Burnover, a few months ago this year. And one of the singles off of it, Curtain, is one of the most beautifully rolling pop rock songs produced by anyone this year. It rambles with a kind of lackadaisical groove that characterized latter period Pavement, but lyrically, Freeman evokes 1960s Bob Dylan with his surrealist lyrical imagery, using the repeated motif of fire and light burning on and off to symbolize a turbulent relationship. As this hypnotic, jammy track tumbles towards its end, the jazziness of old-time, early 20th century music is put into a rock context, much like how the band did in their late 1960s albums. As for the rest of the album, it's a bit mediocre. Freeman is a talent for sure, but like many musical artists of his generation, he suffers from musical ADD in that there are too many changes in the songs and he tends to overstuff the overall music with arrangements that clutter the mix. But there are a few nuggets of brilliance on this record, such as Curtain and the gorgeous spacey ballad Sawmill that will keep my ears pricked up for Greg Freeman's next album, one in which he'll hopefully learn a little more restraint. Chris?
Yeah, this is definitely one of the better songs I've heard this year. A good find on your part. It actually evokes early Wilco too.
Yeah.
In terms of its like you said, it's kind of a rocker, but it's a loose rocker,
Yeah.
and it's a thinking man's type of song. Like you said, there is some of that Dylan. I like the imagery of burning the furniture to keep the house warm,
Yeah.
and using that as a metaphor for just how messed up this relationship is going, and how it's not starting to make sense. But I like it. It's 6.5 minutes long, and the second half turns into this instrumental jam, and the band is kind of a good call because you get these alternating piano, saxophone, and guitar solos
Yeah.
that really lend a depth and a richness to them. And I've seen him listed, his bio in Wikipedia and other places on the net refer to him as alt country. Not really the case.
Yeah.
It's more Americana,
Yeah.
in kind of, it's like Americana pop,
It's rootsy pop rock, I would say that.
yeah, rootsy pop,
Yeah.
rootsy edgy rock and pop.
Yeah.
And so he's got the goods, and if he can get more consistent, I think you're right about the album. There's some really really strong songs, especially in the first half of the record, but there's also some muddled messes as well. But yeah, Greg Freeman's got a future. He's a young guy too. He's probably in his 20s, and who knew? And he's in Burlington, and so he'll be well supported locally. Burlington is still a thriving scene. Speaking of Burlington, kind of a non sequitur, but the bar Nectar's closed within the
That's
last month.
where fish got their start.
Yeah, that's where fish cut their teeth. And a picture of Nectar is named after that club, Nectar's, which just closed in Burlington. So that institution. So I guess we're in a different era, but Burlington is the biggest happen in town in the People's Republic of Vermont. And
Yeah.
so Greg, that's a thriving indie scene still. And so Greg Freeman's gonna, have plenty of support coming out of there.
Maybe
Sure.
Fish will bring him on tour.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Although, as far as I know, I think Paige McConnell. No, 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 no. Mike Gordon. I think I want to say Mike Gordon's the only one that still lives in Burlington.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, because Trey is in Princeton
Yeah.
and
That's his
McCon.
hometown, actually. He's
Yeah,
from New
but
Jersey.
yeah, but he actually lives in Princeton,
Mm,
and McConnell is in New York City.
mm,
And Fishman might still be in Vermont, although he's a Syracuse native. But
yeah.
anyway, non sequitur. Let's get
Speaking of
back to
fish, speaking of fish, the next band you're going to talk about kind of criticize them in one of their songs.
yeah, absolutely, and it's one of the better songs on the record. So I'm going to be focusing on a band that I actually covered in the Parallel Universe about 2 years ago. This is the band Wednesday, and their new album Bleeds, which is actually quite strong and has some really intriguing stuff on it. So let's talk about the band Wednesday and about this album Bleeds. Back in 2023, the Asheville, North Carolina band Wednesday broke out into it band status among American rock critics and the country's pop intelligentsia. Perhaps the gifted singer-songwriter MJ Lenderman's membership in the band as a guitarist and backing vocalist had a little something to do with the initial intention, but it was the engaging persona of frontwoman and primary songwriter Carly Hartzman that really sold Wednesday as an outfit to keep an eye on as they progressed and grew up. Their album from 2023, Rat Saw God, again, Rat Saw God, for sure demonstrated that they indeed had some growing up to do. That album is half great and half insufferable noise. You might expect this from a band that was heavily influenced by shoegazer and other noise rock, but also had flashed some grunge and alt-country heart. Hartman has signed Mitski, The Sundays, Drive-By Truckers, Lucinda Williams, and King of the Road star Roger Miller as formative influences. They might be the only band in history that you can say that about. She's a delectable weirdo with an affinity for dark nostalgia, and when it clicked, Wednesday cranked out some awesome stuff on Rat Saw God. The song Chosen to Deserve might be my favorite by anyone from that year nowadays. Really, really powerful song with just tremendous lyric on it. Now, with their follow-up to Rat Saw God, the recently released album Bleeds, Hartzman and her mates actually are showing signs of maturing as a band. They're consistently more tuneful on Bleeds, still noisy, but now clearer and more melodic. They also lean harder into alt country on this album, at times getting downright twangy and pouring on the pedal steel. Hartzman as a lyricist is still dark and a little tortured at times, but here she's more allowing herself to be more optimistic, or at least to show some more sober realism. With her solidly southern lilt, Hartzman's voice is one of the brightest in all of alt rock at this point. Highlights on the album include the tenderly played and heartfelt first single Elderberry Wine, on which pedal steel accentuates love-struck lyrics, including a sweet one about eyes evoking green tornado sky. The song Fish and Pepsi, which Arturo alluded to, which is another countryish rumble on which Hartzman gets dorkily nostalgic, singing the hilarious couplet, "We watched a Fish concert and Human Centipede, two things I now wish I'd never seen." The Way Love Goes is a surprisingly thoughtful 2-minute ballad on which Hartzman laments the slow dissolution of her romantic relationship with Lenderman. The two broke up after 6 years together in 2024. Bitter Every Day, a stomping rocker about the darkness of life that Hartzman can't seem to avoid. And then the slow boiling but utterly mesmerizing piano driven dirge, Carolina Murder Suicide, a story told from the point of a little girl watching a house burn down across the street. Bleeds is an efficient 12-song, 36-minute collection of sonic portraits assembled from the pangs of Hartzman's past and imagination and from the collective sense of mission of Lenderman and his other bandmates. It's not perfect by any stretch. While they drop much of the annoying noise of Rot Saw God, they could stand to drop even more. But this band is definitely on a strong upward trajectory, and Hartzman may soon find herself in a few years as a genuine heroine to half-broken teenage girls across the world. Arturo?
Yeah, I just don't hear what you hear in this band. I just don't hear it. I don't hear it. I mean, my thing on them, I'll say what I said the last time we talked about this band. Yeah, okay, they have a cool sound, like you said, it's basically a marriage of 1990s alternative rock with alt country slash country rock, and it's a cool sound. They were a cool sounding band, but to me, just the songs aren't there. Like, where are the arresting, engaging, memorable melodies? Where are the hooks? Where are the memorable riffs? Where are, the really like, yeah, okay, most of her lyrics are about trauma of her past. All right, whatever. So what? Like, where are the lyrics that really sink in and make you like really want to revisit them? It's just not memorable. It's just a really good sounding blur of just nothingness, and I feel the same way about a lot of contemporary bands, bands like the Tubs are one of them. Hell, even MJ Lenderman's own stuff, for the most part I find really just not memorable and pretty forgettable. So it just kind of speaks to a lot of what younger generation bands are. They just some of them are great, but you have a lot of them just lack the songwriting, in my opinion. Memorable songwriting, big blaring melodies and hooks. I want to hear that. However, all that being said, Elderberry Wine is a good song. That is probably the first really good song that this band has written. And there's a track toward the very, very end called Gary's 2 in Roman
Yeah,
numerals.
that's a great song too.
Yeah, because it's her getting outside of her comfort zone lyrically, and she's basically doing it's a country song. It's a straight up country number, and it's her telling a twisted redneck story of one cracker bashing another cracker's teeth in. I think that's a way forward to the future for this band lyrically, is for her to start telling crazy weird ass redneck stories. That's more entertaining.
Yeah.
Than hearing her, whinge on about her heartbreak and pain and in songs that have no hooks and melodies or that are discernible or interesting.
Chris here again. We usually end our episodes by inviting you to join our Curmudgeonly community page on Facebook. Well, we're picking up our efforts there. Know people just as passionate as us about rock and roll? Invite them to join in the fun. You don't actually need our permission to do so. Also, expect to see a lot more content up there moving forward. Our mission is to engage you, so darn it, we'll engage you like a fire hose, or maybe like a firehouse if we're going to give love to Gene Simmons. We may also be making a few offers. Want to wear a t-shirt featuring our logo? You may have that opportunity soon. So be a fellow curmudgeon, help us expand our little community, and share your own musings via your own posts. We're at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeonrock.
Fugazi is not just a band. It's also code for a set of fundamental values that, while they're harder to cultivate in today's world, still ring true and are still ably practiced. Now, here is a quote from Fugazi founder and spiritual leader Ian MacKaye, also the head of Washington, D.C. label Dischord Records. Now, this comes from a 2015 interview with an online publication called Loud and Quiet. So, quoting MacKaye now, quote, "So many people have come to me over the years and have said, 'How do I start a label?' And I just say, 'Get a band. Get some music you want to document.' I think so many people have been brought up around the idea that this is a career. Over the last decade, there's been all these advertisements on television that are like young people in indie rock bands in their VW cars to carry their electric guitars or whatever. And there is this weird emphasis of we're in a band now, like it's a career choice. I don't think of it as a career. I think of it as something that just has to come out. I think it is a form of communication that predates language. I don't think Nina Simone was like, maybe I'll be a doctor or maybe I'll be a musician. I don't think that happened. It was just something that had to come out of her. Today, I think that mentality exists. I'll be a musician. Music is becoming content. And remember, this is in 2015.
Yeah.
You can see it with these streaming services. You just sign up and subscribe to the service, and you get all this content. It's not music, it's content. They don't care. They do not care. The people that run those businesses do not give a fuck about music. What they care about is content. They want the subscribers. I think even labels are moving in that direction too. It's really depressing, but that's the way it goes. If you think about the relationship people had to music in 1850, imagine what music meant to people, how rich it was. What's happening now is that music has been degraded, but music is deep. It's deeper than a lot of people truly understand. I understand that there's been a marketplace built around music, but that's not music. That's just the marketplace. That's just business. Music was here long before the music industry. End quote. That's some real guru shit right there. Right,
Yeah,
Art?
that's like I would say that's intense. Not humanism isn't the word, but Puritanism. That's intense Puritanism in a good way, not in a bad way, because you can be
Yeah.
puritanical in a bad way. But where Ian MacKay's coming from, I understand it, and especially we just talked about it earlier. You know, the cost of living and the cost of entertainment keeps going up, and the more music is seen as commodity, the more that cost is going to go up. You
Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
so yeah, so he's very much a fundamentalist when it comes to his view of music and the culture around music. And yeah, it's old school, but we kind of need now the way things are going now. We kind of need that old school again. We kind
Yeah.
of need to go back to that a little bit to basically take the heat off this intense, casino capitalistic way of viewing music.
Yeah.
And we need to really kind of get a little bit of that old school mentality back. Even though for like
Yeah.
a lot of younger generation people, it's outdated, and I can understand that. But we need a little bit of that old school mentality back. You know, maybe not all the way as extreme as Mackay did with his band Fugazi, who we both love, but a little bit of that sentiment needs to come back into the
Yeah.
way we perceive music, I think.
Yeah, I mean a lot of the DIY, because of the social mediaization of music distribution, it's like people love the earworms. They love the 6-second bites.
Sure.
But it's gotten harder for kids just generally based on the way they consume media now.
Yeah.
It's gotten harder to especially because services like Spotify, like the quality of the MP3s is just crap.
Yeah.
And if you're getting your music through a computer, if you don't have decent speakers, and that's the thing now, it's like, what's happened to hi-fi, back in the 1970s, like your music setup could take up your whole fucking living room, and was just gargantuan. So you really don't get the high fidelity. So how are you enjoying that music? But, I think that there's enough of a cult, underneath of folks that are searching for true meaning and are rebelling against the sort of the commoditization that we're talking about. That I think the spirit of Fugazi does still live. It's just a smaller, harder thing to achieve. And so, with that said, let's get into Fugazi and what they pulled off and how they pulled it off and how they started, and kind of get into their original formation and this philosophy that given Mackay's quote was pretty much evident from the very beginning
Yeah.
of their story.
Sure. After the demise of Minor Threat Ian MacKaye focused much of his time on running Discord Records, but he never really abandoned making music, particularly fronting the short-lived band Embrace, which lasted just less than a year, from summer 1985 through spring 1986. Alongside Rites of Spring, another Washington, D.C. band, Embrace were generally regarded as one of the foundational bands in the development of emo punk. Mackay befriended Joe Lally, who was a roadie for the band Beefeater. Upon learning that Lally played bass, Mackay invited him to form a band as a trio, with Mackay brushing off his guitar and picking it up. They recruited drummer Colin Sears, who played drums for Dag Nasty, another DC hardcore punk band, and the original incarnation of the band that would become Fugazi was formed in the fall of 1986. In early 1987, Sears went back to Dag Nasty, and Mackay and Lally brought in Brendan Canty to play drums. Canty previously played drums for Rites of Spring, whose lead singer, Guy Picciotto, would soon become a huge part, as we know, of the Fugazi story. The trio of Mackay, Lally, and Canty named themselves Fugazi after a word used in Mark Baker's Nam, a compilation of nonfiction stories of Vietnam War veterans. Supposedly, the word Fugazi was a slang acronym at the time for fucked up, got ambushed, zipped in, as in zipped in a body bag. Soon enough, Picciotto was hanging out with his buddy Canty at Fugazi's practice sessions and apparently endeared himself enough to get invited to join the band. Of course, Picciotto would eventually grow into being a pivotal member of the band, becoming the second guitarist, co-frontman, and co-lead singer, and just as important a songwriter and creative force as Mackay. However, at this early stage in the band's development, he was something akin to a band mascot. He shared vocal duties with Mackay, but on stage he was essentially an interpretive dancer, quote unquote, and a performance art component. The buzz from both music media circles and underground rock aficionados surrounding Fugazi's self-titled debut EP from 1988 ensured the band's immediate impact. But before we go into that seminal EP, what say you, Chris, about this unique band's origins?
Yeah, it is interesting that Fugazi, which is one of the great post-hardcore
Yeah,
bands of all time, really does spring from two of the lead pioneering emo bands,
yeah.
and so yeah, and some of that actually seeped into the early music that they made as well. That it's like emo hardcore.
Yeah.
It's kind of what they did. But here's a story I wanted to share about Fugazi and about some of, and you mentioned some of the, their sort of DIY and sort of their hardcore stances in the parameter setter. But here's a story for you. So back in 1999, when I was a young reporter, started off my life as a journalist, and I'm working for an outfit called SonicNet in New York, which eventually SonicNet merged with MTV News and became basically MTV News Online, just as I was leaving that job. But I had an assignment, and I can't even remember what it was. It was something music business oriented about indie rock or about clubs as well. Sort of the growth of in the I guess the evolution of the club circuit for indie bands. It was something along those lines. I can't even remember what. But in doing some research, it occurred to me that it might be good to talk to Ian MacKaye, given his status in DC and and given his status as the owner of Discord and also being the head of Fugazi. So I did some research and I dug up the main phone number of Discord in DC, and I figured I'd call it, and whoever answered, I would just be like, "Hey, I'm so and so, and we're doing this story, and we'd really love to schedule time with Ian Mackay to get his perspective on this." So lo and behold, I called the number, and guy answers the phone. uh, hey, hey, it's Ian. And and hey, I was thinking back at first, and I went into my shtick about asking, and he turns out, lo and behold, Ian Mackay answered the phone. It was the main line at Discord Records,
Yeah.
and proceeded, and it was a little awkward at first because I was taken aback, but I recovered enough, and we just did the interview right then and there.
Mm.
So yeah, no going through a publicist, no layers, no formalities. It was just the guy that led the band and that led the the record label answered his damn phone. Didn't even have a secretary.
Well, I mean,
So
like I said in the Parameter Center, they managed themselves. They did
yep,
their own publicity. They booked all their own shows and tours themselves. They were their own road crew. You know,
yeah.
they are the ultimate DIY band.
Well, the craziest thing I read about them is it's not so much. It wasn't so much a, this fierce independent streak in some ways. Some of it had to do with pragmatic cheapness.
Yeah, sure,
One of
sure.
the crazy things was is that they didn't sell merch at their shows because they figured cause that meant they would have had to pay somebody to be their merchandising manager, and so which
Fuck
would have
that.
that would have cut down on their margin. So
Yeah,
it's like they forewent uh, selling merch so that they could keep the money they got from the gate.
yeah,
And yeah, and one of the things too is, like Mackay was adamant about policing their shows, and
yeah.
he would stop shows and shame guys that would do slam dancing.
He
And
was really intense about like audience etiquette. Like you
yeah,
have to behave yourself.
yeah, and part of that reason was because another interview I saw where they had a show where they spent what do they call it, the barricade,
Yeah.
where the cost for the barricade at the front of the show cost more than the gate that they brought in. So they lost money on the show because the barricade and the security cost an ass load. And
Yeah.
so again, pragmatic cheapness. I said, Mackay was cheap.
Yeah.
Uh, so there you go.
Well, bless him for it, because nowadays we all need to start being cheap.
Yep.
All right, let's go to the let's start going into these albums and EPs. All right. First, the debut EP, self-titled Fugazi from 1988. It's startling to hear how fully formed Fugazi was as a band when this EP dropped. It's even more startling to hear, especially compared to how experimental and stylistically expansive they became and would become known for. It's startling to hear how full of catchy anthemic songs the EP is. More than any other Fugazi record, this is their most conventional song-based recording, with tracks bringing forth one rousing sing-along chorus after another, as well as arresting melodies. The speedy aggression of hardcore punk was a distant memory by this point in Ian Mackay's musical evolution, and the music coming out of the original trio, while still a bit spiky and jagged, fit much easier alongside the burgeoning alternative rock movement that the US underground was churning out at the time. Waiting Room is to this day Fugazi's signature song with its tense build-up and cathartic release. Suggestion is one of the best feminist anthems about gender roles ever written by white straight guys, while Bulldog Front, Bad Mouth, and Give Me the Cure, with its bold rumination on death, keep the jams coming. And they're surprisingly radio-friendly jams at that. In a parallel universe version of 1988, that is. Unlike the raw, emotional declarations of the members' previous bands, Fugazi's lyrics were introspective and impressionistic, yet never alienating or obtuse. Among both fans and critics, Fugazi's debut EP marks the moment that the term post-hardcore became a thing. A whole wave of indie underground music fans and future musicians found their new heroes, and the EP is, simply put, one of the best, most perfect rock EPs of all time. Chris?
Yeah, really good stuff. And see, this is weird for me because before we uh researched and prepared for this episode, I was unfamiliar with this EP and the next EP that we were going to talk about by name, in terms of knowing that there were EPs. However, I was familiar with the compilation of the two that became the album 13 Songs, which was their first formal LP release. Not really their studio debut, but it was like a compilation. And so I'm familiar with 13 Songs as a 13 song album, but
Yeah, it's actually a compilation.
but what it really is the first EP stacked on top of the second EP.
Yeah.
And so I look at these two EPs as kind of two parts of the same whole, which is to say, it's fucking great. Mackay was in a zone as a songwriter here. Like I said, Waiting Room is just classic. Most of you probably know it without knowing that you know it because it's so pervasive and
Yeah.
and so famous. Like one of the great bass lines of all time is on that from Joe Lally, and it just has this energy, and it just has this fluidity to it. It's really really cool. Like you said, Suggestion is fantastic, just a real slow burner. And then Glue Man has a little bit more of that feel too. It turns out Mackay was obviously influenced by reggae.
And the Police. You can hear it on
Yeah,
this.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. And the Police, Brendan Canty's playing is clearly influenced by Stuart Copeland's, and so yeah, there's the Police, there's reggae by extension. There's the Clash, there's those bands there. So the fact that they were able to splice, sort of the influences of hardcore punk and reggae and put together this sort of song-based alternative rock was a real, genuine accomplishment for sure. And then Pachotto, is he's singing some. He's not yet playing guitar.
Yeah.
As you said, he was a vocalist and interpretive dancer at this point, and I'm not sure he even wrote the lyrics that he sings here, but he brings to it, and there's an immediate contrast between Mackay, who's more of a sort of a inarticulate screamer in the classic punk mode. It's all fury without much nuance. Whereas you have Picado, who's like all nuance, just this pain, passion, and really articulate. And he's almost like Lee Ronaldo from Sonic Youth. Out of that same kind of emotive punk singing sort of tradition. So the contrast of the two voices, and especially when they share the mic together on a couple of songs, is really, really striking, and is one of the great features of Fugazi, for sure.
Next, their second EP, Margin Walker from 1989. It's hard to follow up one of the greatest EPs of all time with another EP, but that's what Fugazi tried to do with Margin Walker. In fact, when the band recorded the songs in London in late 1988, it was intended to be the band's first full-length album. However, they were unhappy with the quality of many of the songs as well as the performances captured on tape, possibly due to the touring exhaustion they were going through at the time. And because of that, only 6 tracks survived to make up this EP. Hearing it now, it's clear that there's a pretty drastic dip in quality from the absolute perfection of the self-titled EP, but there are a couple of songs that are worth the price of admission. The title track, Margin Walker, has a terrific snaky bass line and an aggressively staccato guitar riff, while Burning 2 roars with a passion and a fist-pumping chorus that marks the best of the debut EP. It's your classic case of taking one step back to make a gigantic leap forward, which Fugazi would do with their next release. Chris?
Yeah, there's some good stuff on here. Like you said, it's not quite as consistently awesome as the first EP, but like Burning 2 is great. Provisional is awesome. It, has a really surprising sensuality and a pulse to it, and really cool vocal by Pachotto. And then Promises, which is the album closer, is just awesome. Just intense and engrossing, and probably Mackay's finest vocal performance on either EP. just really, really just, kind of out of his mind, furious in how he delivers the vocals here. And then the outro of it of that song is really, really fiery as well. So, like you said, not quite as consistent, not quite as inspired, but still pretty goddamn good. And has a couple of killer songs on it. And Promises is the one classic on it, I think.
All right, next, Repeater from 1990, their first official full-length album. If there is such a thing as a star turn on an indie underground, this is it for Fugazi, as this debut full-length album is where Fugazi became motherfucking Fugazi. The focus on rousing anthemic choruses in the songs takes a bit of a backseat to a thrillingly unique kind of rock music, one of gnarled, coiled intensity that permeates throughout the entire album like a snarling beast. By this point, Guy Picciotto had started to play second guitar in the band, but it was Ian MacKay's guitar that still took center stage. He's never been known as a guitar hero, but he probably should be remembered as such, especially on Repeater, because you hear such original riffs and innovative guitar lines. His use of noise and feedback as a musical texture that's actually compelling and appealing betray a serious sonic youth influence. The Brendan Canty, Joe Lally rhythm section wasn't your typical meat and potatoes, punky bash out rhythm section. They were lithe, fluid, funky, and slinky, and they wrapped around Mackay's guitar as much as they thrust the sound forward. The title track is twisted post-hardcore funk, while the dehumanizing effects of mindless consumerism seem to be the dominant lyrical theme on the album, as evidenced by tracks such as Merchandise, Blueprint, and Greed. It was angrier, denser, more complex in the best way possible, more visceral, and more cathartic than anything they had done before. And in short time, it became a classic of indie alternative US rock, a stature that it still has to this day. This is Fugazi's official entry in my list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. One last thing. In the same year, 1990, Fugazi also released a limited edition EP called 3 Songs. Basically, they're outtakes from this album that didn't make the cut. I don't know why they left them off. All 3 songs rock serious balls and are about as good as anything on Repeater. Later CD editions of Repeater would include the 3 Songs EP as bonus tracks. Chris?
Yeah. Generally speaking, on the streaming sites and in the CDs, starting from the late '90s, the album kit was released as Repeater plus 3 songs.
Right.
And so they're kind of considered part of the same whole. This album is brilliant. I agree with you. I think it is a 500 greatest albums entry. It's just so energetic and so fluid and so inspired and so creative.
Original. Nothing sounded like this when it came out.
I know. I mean, with that supple of a rhythm section, and then on top of that, you have this interplay of the guitars between Mackay and Picciotto, where you said Mackay's sort of like low end riffage, and is still kind of the predominant thing, but Picciotto was painting on the corners with some really neat, more high pitched stuff, and so you get that sort of guitar workout going along with those rhythms, and then that's where you get Repeater, you get the brilliant, awesome little instrumental called Brendan Number One. There's the Merchandise, which is incredible and has like one of the great rock business fuck yous ever penned. Quote, "Merchandise keeps us in line. Common sense says it's by design. What could a businessman ever want more than to have us sucking in his store? We owe you nothing. You have no control. You are not what you own." End quote.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
And then the album closer, Shut the Door, showed they weren't afraid to get a little artier. So they weren't going to be constrained by any sort of conventions, that they could get a little artier. And like you said, there's a little bit of that Sonic Youth thing going on. And and that song is slinky, it's sexy, it's got that soft, loud dynamic. And you've got that construction where it has this really chimey lead line next to a crunchier rhythm part, and the bass just lurks, and then it just builds into this explosive chorus. So really, really, really special. Couple other things to mention: Loudwire, which is a heavy metal and hard rock magazine that sometimes has questionable tastes,
Yeah.
yeah, they love themselves some Linkin Park, but anyway, they did an exercise last year where they rated the best hard rock album from every year from 1970 all the way through 2023,
Mm.
and their best hard rock album of 1990 is Repeater. Now,
Wow.
granted, that's the same year Ragged Glory came out, so I don't know, if I completely agree with it. But yeah, it just kind of shows you again those lot. It's also on Pitchfork's 100 Best Albums of the 90s list.
Right.
So this is the album that gets the love and has withstood the test of time. This is canonical,
Yeah, it
not
is.
not 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 just for Fugazi, but for rock in general.
Yeah. Next, Steady Diet of Nothing from 1991. On the outset or initial listen, this album sounds like Repeater Part 2, but there are some significant differences. You finally get the sense that this is a full-fledged two-guitar band, with Guy Picciotto's guitar work weaving in with Ian MacKay's to give the band an expansive sound as well as a newfound heaviness. Uh, Lyrically, it was their most pointedly political album to date. The band laments the retirement of a liberal Supreme Court justice on Dear Justice letter. They show solidarity with the pro-choice, pro-abortion movement on reclamation, and KYEO tackles police brutality against ethnic minorities. There's also a variety of moods on Steady Diet, as opposed to the steady onslaught of high-energy anger on Repeater. The album's first half sways from slower mid-tempo grooves to quieter instrumentals before the record's second half explodes with the band's usual bombast. It's quite a thrilling listen and perhaps the most underrated album in the group's catalog. Chris?
Yeah, it probably is underrated, and part of it has to do with timing, in that
Yeah.
it came out 2 months before Nevermind and 10.
Yeah.
And so I mean, so they kind of got lost in shuffle a little bit when the grunge revolution happened.
Right.
But it's a really good record. It's not quite as good as Repeater, and for the simple reason that they produced it themselves.
Mm.
I think the story goes that their original producer, a guy named, I believe his name was Ted Nicely, was going to culinary school, and by this point was working as a chef, so
Oh.
wasn't as available. So they were kind of stuck, trying to figure it out themselves. And clearly they had a long way to go, because the mix is really sloppy,
Yeah.
where the drums and the guitars are way up in the mix, and it sounds kind of it sounds kind of raw and rough, and those types of things. And to me, the songwriting, it goes up and down a little bit. Like Reclamation is an awesome song. Latin Roots is fun. That's Picciotto talking about his Latino girlfriend. Long Division is kind of pretty. It's probably the most exciting song on the record. Really melodic lead line and swiftly shifting rhythm. Earnest yelping from Mackay. Best song on the album is "Dear Justice Letter." That song's incredible. It's about Justice William Brennan, who was retiring or had just retired at that point, and so they were, it's kind of prescient now given what's all the bullshit that's happening with the modern day Supreme Court, to hear them kind of expressing that lament, but also that sort of dread about what may be coming out of there,
Mm.
as far as the growing conservatism of the judiciary in general at that point. and just really great kind of co-lead singing from Pachotto and Mackay. Just really, really great stuff. And so, you know, one thing to say is, when Nirvana came out, they did benefit from that because now you have young people seeking more meaningful rock. And so
Right.
Pachotto did said in interviews, hey, their crowds did get bigger,
Yeah.
but the album itself ended up historically lost in the shuffle because
Right.
of all the hullabaloo that the other bands were getting.
Right. Next, In on the Kill Taker from 1993. The explosion in popularity of alternative rock, like you mentioned, Chris, in the early 1990s, led by Nirvana and the whole Seattle grunge scene, meant that there was newfound attention drawn to Fugazi by the more mainstream elements of music media. Their strictly anti-commercial, anti-corporate stance and the fact that they were one of the very few bands that walked it like they talked it made them a point of interest even to mainstream news outlets such as the Washington Post and the New York Times. That, combined with the massive word of mouth following the band had garnered since their debut EP made such a splash, resulted In on the In on the Kill Taker actually debuting at number 153 on the Billboard album chart, which is quite a feat for this most defiantly indie of indie rock bands. However, all the media hoopla surrounding Fugazi at the time conveniently covered up the fact that the album was the first time that Fugazi had not taken a step forward in their music. In on the Kill Taker isn't a bad album by any means. In fact, if this is your gateway record for Fugazi, you would probably and rightfully think it's awesome. But for those who are already familiar with their discography, there's a sense of musical as well as lyrical recycling of a band whose sound had started to get a bit stale. While the album still has rousing, righteous Fugazi classics such as Smallpox Champion and Great Cop, the group had hit it really hit a wall. And the bone dry production, this album was produced by this guy Ted Nicely that you mentioned, Chris, didn't help matters either. I actually think the production on Steady Diet of Nothing is better than the production on this one. But hey, it's still Fugazi, it still kicks ass, and it still rocks and gnarls. It just doesn't blow away with the shock of the new, like their earlier brilliant work. But that narrative would very quickly change with their next album. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, this was definitely their most ambitious record to date. I also think it's a little bit of a self-conscious record in the sense that they knew that they had a platform now that
Yeah.
people were paying attention to hard rock and punk and that had become a thing and you had kids like me and you that were seeking it out.
Yeah.
I remember when I first got to SU that in conversations with classmates I was in classes with and also hanging out at Spectrum, which was the student center record store. Like Fugazi was one of those things. So you had to get into Fugazi. Fugazi has to be a part of your collection. So yeah, I got into this record, and then this was my gateway to Fugazi. So I mean, I hold it in some esteem. I think it's a pretty diverse record in a lot of ways. I think that there's a lot of like Lee Ronaldo, Sonic Youth type of influence. Like Smallpox Champion is probably the best example of that. There's also songs like Rend It, which is
Yeah.
kind of a combination of Gang of Four
Mm.
and
Another big influence on Fugazi that people don't talk about.
yeah, and yeah, so that, and then it's just kind of the slow burning psychedelia, and great vocal performance from Pachotto on that. Just really doing his best kind of obnoxious British
Yeah.
impression. 23 Beats Off is also kind of awesome. It sounds like Wire. It's like a really
Yeah.
stretched out Wire song.
Yeah.
I've always loved Great Cop. I mean, that was
Mm.
probably the punkiest thing
Yeah.
that they ever did. I mean, that was like Mackay almost like going back to Minor Threat. And so, so it's kind of it. I think it's artsier, it's chancier, and they're really playing with a lot of different punk styles. Is it as focused the Fugazi EP? Hell no. Is it as innovative as Repeater? Hell no. But there's still a lot of great stuff on here, and it's probably louder than anything they'd done before. Funny story on this is they recorded a first version of this with Steve Albini,
Huh.
of In Utero and Rid of Me fame, and Pixies fame, but they scrapped it. They didn't like it, and
Hmm.
I'm just like, which is weird because Albini was on a roll at that time. Like
Yeah, I know.
nobody recorded drums better than him. He did a great job of capturing vocals. Like the vocals that he caught from PJ Harvey are astonishing on Rid of Me. And
Yeah.
so it's like, so what was it about Albini's mix that they didn't like? Did they think it was too, did they think it was too commercial? Did they
Well,
think it,
Chris, why don't you call up Ian MacKaye on Discord Records and ask him?
yeah, as far as I know, he's still running Discord.
Ask him.
Um,
Hey, Ian, when are you going to release the original version of In on the Kill Taker?
yeah,
Well, I mean,
yeah,
Albini's dead now, so there might be some legal wrangling necessary to get that done, but
yeah,
who
I
knows?
know. But I could just imagine, like, like what is it they didn't like about that? But
Yeah.
it probably, in a lot of ways it's probably less muddy and more rocking,
Yeah.
even more rocking than
Right.
what in on the Kill Taker turned out to be.
On this episode, we examined the musical and cultural legacy of Fugazi. For the next episode, we're going to continue our In Defense of series by giving some much deserved love to one of the greatest and most successful pop groups of the 1970s, ABBA. No, seriously. This Swedish quartet, comprised of two couples, conquered the world with their underratedly eclectic brand of pure pop that ran the gamut from glam rock to disco to lush balladry to funky grooves. From the 1980s onward, they've become a bit of a punchline among certain sectors of music media and hipster music fans, but yours truly, Curmudgeons, believe that's deeply unfair. There was a crisp and sometimes even complex sophistication to the group's songcraft, as well as, here's that word again, an underrated depth to their lyricism that made their amazing run of hit singles from 1974 through 1980 stand the test of time with the absolute best artists of their era, no matter what genre of music. So, join us next time as the Curmudgeon Rock Report brings you In Defense of ABBA. Next, Red Medicine from 1995. The first thing you notice about Red Medicine if you're experiencing Fugazi's discography in chronological order for the first time, as everyone should listen to any band's discography, should be in chronological order, is how well produced it is, especially compared to the stale, flat sound of In on the Kill Taker. The first album the band produced, oh no, this is the first, not the first album they produced themselves, but they went back to producing it themselves.
Yes.
And they actually learned something this time. It has an overall richer, meatier, more full bodied sound. The guitars are way up in the mix, and the rhythm section snaps and cracks right out of the speakers. Musically, this is the album where Fugazi finally flex their stylistic muscles and show off the diversity of their influences. Ian MacKaye's and Guy Picciotto's guitars launch into abstract noise sculptures on the psychedelic Bayou. The band delve into ambient soundscapes on Version. They always hinted at dub reggae in previous recordings, but go full on dub, albeit by way of Public Image Limited and the Jesus Lizard, on album finale Long Distance Runner. On tracks like Back to Base and Downed City, Fugazi even start to show some alignment with the burgeoning emo punk movement of the time, one that they helped inspire, even though they themselves never really were emo. And of course, MacKaye stretches himself as a guitarist with a beautifully elliptical riff on Bed for the Scraping. Repeater was never and would never be topped, but Red Medicine gets my vote for second best Fugazi album. Chris?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really good record. And, I'm a bigger fan of one of the albums that came after it, which we'll talk about soon. But yeah, this is definitely a much better and much more confident self-produced effort. I
Yeah.
think it's looser and wilder than In on the Kill Taker, and probably looser and wilder than anything they'd ever done up until this point. The drum recording is just awesome on this. There's a looseness and awesomeness to Bed for the Scraping that I love. Latest Disgrace has that little skitter that at the beginning. It turns out that was a big influence on John Frusciante of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who incorporated that touch in
Yeah.
several songs in the late Chili Peppers catalog, including Parallel Universe. That chicka 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 chicka,
Yeah.
they definitely come. And so Latest Disgrace is the influence on that. I would say, there's a fluidity to the album, that's pretty surprising. I think, Version is cheesy, but really good. Forensic Scene is a real lurker, slowly but heavily rendered. Like By You, like you can hear some dub influence in that. Birthday Pony is a weird ass song, with odd piano notes at the beginning. And so like I said, you get the sense they had more fun with this
Yeah.
record. And one thing I will say, I think the coolest thing about it is that some of the songs have real swing to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
they use a real, they had a better sense of the space around the music.
Yeah.
They really use space. Like Combination Lock is an awesome little instrumental that just has a real swing to it. Fell Destroyed is just minimal and airy, and still has a swinging bop to it as well. And the second half, A Long Distance Runner, has that sort of relaxed, air-filled, minimalist swing to it as well. So I think they're getting more playful, but also I think they're getting more comfortable with each other at
Yeah.
this point. I think that they're discovering each other, and this album came after, like, they jammed out for months at a barn in Connecticut to really hone a lot of this stuff. And I think you can tell that this music was lived in by the time they recorded it. So yeah, good stuff.
Next, End Hits from 1998. This album continues the experimental bent Fugazi began on Red Medicine, but unfortunately they stretched themselves out a little too thin on meandering and indulgent noise tracks like Closed Captioned and Floating Boy. Fortunately, these songs failed to sync the record, as some of the group's most and more out there tracks still manage to connect and resonate, such as the haunting, ghostly, post punk vibe of Pink Frosty. And this being Fugazi, there's no shortage of fist pumping, ass kicking stompers, such as Arpeggiator, which is the most dynamic, corrosive, mind melting instrumental the band ever did. The most enduring and famous track on the record is Five Corporations, a classic Ian MacKaye led scorcher that ruminates on how almost every aspect of American life, from both a consumerist and entertainment standpoint, can be traced back to the controlling structures of just five corporate conglomerates. Boy, was he prescient about that one.
Yeah, no shit.
It isn't peak Fugazi, but it's still damn good Fugazi, which means it's better than most bands' best material. Chris?
Yeah, this is their most studio dependent record. They took 7 months to record it, and they really played around with, like especially drums. Like Canty is the star of this record because, they're experimenting with drum layering. They used drum machines at one point on Closed Caption, which is an okay song. No Surprise actually is a really great song. Like the lead lines are really clean and really polished. More so than on most of their records. And so, like I said, the record has its charms. But yeah, you're right. There's some real, like, Floating Boy is just crap. And so there's a little too much of where they're getting cute. And again, I think they're having a little too much fun playing around in the studio, and they forgot to make a consistently great record.
Well, they
But
were actually making money at this point because they were,
yeah,
they were touring and they were playing bigger venues, like 4,000 capacity venues.
they were doing well. So they had budget. And so, that's why they could take 7 months and fuck around with the studio. But yeah, I agree with you. Five Corporations is definitely the best song on the album. It's actually overall might be one of their top 10 songs.
Yeah,
Just really,
sure.
really, really, really strong.
And not just appropriate for its day, but more than appropriate for now. It resonates
Yeah.
now more than
Oh,
ever.
absolutely. I mean, a lot, but that's true of a bunch of their songs.
Yeah,
That they were kind of ahead of their time of seeing the kind of dystopia that we're
yeah,
starting to get now.
right.
They were really on top of their shit.
All right, and finally, The Argument from 2001. The last album that Fugazi released before they amicably broke up a year later is the sound of a kindler, gentler Fugazi. They were all either in their 40s or soon approaching their 40s, and that maturity seeped into some of the most dynamic, densely textured music of their career. There's a heightened, overt melodic sensibility, not just in the vocals, but in the guitar riffs and lead guitar lines. Lo and behold, there are vocal harmonies throughout the record, and even sweet, smooth backing vocals, such as on the beautifully lilting track Life in Limb. The middle passages of the title track, which include never before heard acoustic guitars and sparkling keyboards, are actually genuinely pretty. The stately progression of Strange Light is richly textured and gorgeously melodic to the point that it can be described as elegiac. It feels weird to call any album in the subgenre of post-hardcore punk as graceful, but that's exactly what Fugazi achieved on their final album, a fitting statement of solemn beauty and hard-worn dignity in one of the rock canon's most consistently brilliant and rewarding catalogs. Chris?
Yeah, this is a great record. Great record. I mean, this is their best album since Repeater, and just for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. There's just a lot of, they're just at this point, there's much better songcraft on this album than on its predecessor. They're back to being noisier and edgier and less cute.
Yeah.
But also that they're just their assurance as producers at this point. They had gotten to the point where they showed that they can engineer competently, experiment ably, and still manage to write great songs.
Yeah.
To,
Yeah.
and to do all three. I mean, they basically did it on Red Medicine, but here I think that the songs are more consistently engaging. There's not as much goofiness. Like Strange Light is just wonderful, and just it's just lovely while also being intense. Night Shop is a really great song, and that's where the acoustic guitar is even more pronounced than on Argument. And then, of course, at the beginning, near the beginning of the record, you have this one-two banging punch of Full Disclosure and Epic Problem.
Yeah.
Epic Problem is just amazing. Just really blasts through, heavy as hell, and really making a full-fledged return to screaming post-hardcore
Yeah.
there. So, I mean, The Kill is really good, and that's a Joe Lally
Yeah.
song, and it's really the bass drive really drives things at that point, and the guitars really just sort of paint. And so I think that this is their probably their uh, best studio achievement as producers, and it's not quite as awesomely exciting as Repeater,
Yeah.
but it's just really enjoyable and really moving in spots too.
Yeah.
And it's an adult record, in some ways, like they're on the edge of their youth, leaving their youth when they did Repeater, and so it's kind of like that desperately holding on to youth energy, whereas here they're just sort of more content and just sort of being mature and looking for a full-bodied, just really strong and polished record, and they really pulled it off. So yeah, like I said, so their albums to me go, I would say Repeater one, 13 songs two, like the two EPs put together, and then The Argument number three is how I
Yeah,
rank them.
I go Repeater. Well, no, honestly, I go Repeater, then the first EP, The debut EP,
Yeah,
then Red Medicine, then this one, The Argument. That's
yeah,
how I
yeah. Really, really great stuff. And so for what it's worth, they never disbanded. What they did is they went on a permanent hiatus.
permanent hiatus. Okay.
Yeah,
In other words,
and
they
so
broke up.
yeah. Well, what they did is they went their separate ways. By this point, like I said, they're growing up. I think a couple of them had moved away from DC, and they had other business interests and other musical projects that they wanted to do.
And they also were getting older and they got married and had families, you know? I
Yeah, and they
mean,
had families, so they had their family commitments. They didn't have as much time I think it was about quality control too. It was like, they weren't going to do it if they weren't going to be able to be at their best like they
yeah.
were. And so
I mean,
between the
they
family,
had a reputation to maintain, you know?
yeah, exactly. And so, they've jammed in private, when all four of them are in DC, they'll get together and they'll have jam sessions and all that. They did release and recently, actually just this year, they've been starting to release a series of live
Right.
albums from
Yeah.
from various points of their career. And this was an awesome live band. We haven't talked much
Oh,
about that,
yeah, that's true. Yeah, they were
but
known.
they used to blow the fucking roof
Yeah.
off of the place. And you listen to those tapes, and just whoever I don't know if they did their own sound, but they just came across just awesomely, just powerful live. I never saw them live, but they must have been something. Just really just like almost like a religious rock experience.
And for
I
those of
mean,
you who really want to see live Fugazi and in good sound quality, not those like homemade home videos you see on YouTube, there's a documentary called Instrument
yes,
that came out in 1999. And it has really great, like professionally shot live footage of Fugazi. And you can hear how awesome they were live if you
yeah,
watch this documentary, which I might
yeah,
do tonight.
yeah. There you go, and maybe I will too. So there you go. So uh, it'd be like
Chris,
it would
it's
be kind of interesting since they're all in their 60s now. It really would be
50s,
interesting
really.
if they came back.
Yeah, I mean, Makai's the oldest. He
63.
is he's 63, right? The others are approaching 60, if not already there. But yeah, these guys are old now, and I don't think they're gonna come back. They're too old. I mean, you already have
Yeah,
Matt Cameron, the drummer from Pearl Jam, and previously the Soundgarden, who's basically retiring because I
yeah.
just can't do it anymore. I'm too old, you know.
Yeah, I know. He quit Pearl Jam, and how long are they willing to go? Because like the Pearl Jam guys are all in their 60s now too.
Yes, they
Yeah,
are.
Stone Gossard, I think. No, actually, Gossard is 59.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, Vetter is still, I'll tell you right now, Vetter is
62,
60. He turned 61 this year. Um,
61.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah, and I think the youngest, like Gossard, I think was born in 66.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so
they're hovering 60.
yeah, I was gonna say, hey, rock and roll will never die, but
It will get old.
but it will get older. And for what it's worth, by the way, R.I.P. Ace Frehley. Speaking of
Yeah,
rock aging out,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, we should have mentioned that the beginning of the episode.
yeah, him and D'Angelo. There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah,
Anyway, Chris.
Ace and D'Angelo are jamming in heaven.
Yes. And listening to Fugazi, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, we're gonna end it. You're the big picture guy of this podcast. Give us the big picture, the aftermath, the legacy of Fugazi, why and how they should be remembered.
Okay, so there's really three variables when it comes to discussing the legacy of Fugazi and why they're important, and and the effect that they've had on the music that came afterwards, and also the music business that followed. So there's three of these. The first one is control. They taught other musicians to put their music and artistry first. In Fugazi's case, they took it to the extreme, refusing to sign with a major label even after receiving an extravagant offer from Atlantic Records in 1993. Seriously,
Yeah.
Ahmet Ertegun himself pitched them, was going to
Right.
give them $10 million and their own imprint, and they turned it down. They also turned down headlining Lollapalooza
Right.
because the tickets were $33.
That they actually seriously considered. Atlantic
Yeah,
Records, they never really considered that. But for Lollapalooza, because they were going to get good money for that.
yeah,
So they really considered that. They were like, oh, wait a minute, the ticket prices? Fuck that.
yeah, exactly. And so, really, most successful artists in the years since Fugazi debuted, they have chosen to go the major label route. But the meaning of Fugazi's stance to keep things affordable and to maintain the integrity of the music has rubbed off on artists like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and in later years, even on artists like Taylor Swift. In Swift's case, she recently actually won back her original masters, but
Hmm.
while she was in that fight, she actually chose to re-record several of her albums so that she could reclaim ownership of them.
Yeah.
The importance of being in control and being the master of your music was a really important principle for Taylor
Prince
Swift.
also. Prince was
Yeah,
doing this.
Prince did the same thing, and then but Pearl Jam obviously like they took the Fugazi route, and Mackay was clearly an influence on Vedder's stances on not making videos after the first album and for fighting Ticketmaster and going with alternate ticket vendors and putting and fighting some of the fights that they did, and also being as politically active as they were
Right.
with causes. So there was that. So and then like I said, I think a lot of artists, these days, a lot of artists in their contracts, or if they get successful, they're able to start their own imprints. Like Beyonce has done that. And a few rock bands have done that. I mean, I want to say Trent Reznor was able to do that, at some point, and a lot of that traces back to Ian MacKay's ownership of Discord.
Right.
He owned Discord going back to when he was doing Minor Threat, and so so he was kind of a kind of rock star owner
Yeah.
was a concept that he
Sure.
kind of invented. And so while these artists won't contain their ambitions to rule the world, which is why they signed with major labels, Fugazi at least gave them the blueprint for doing it without completely selling out.
Right.
Now, one other thing, imagine if Fugazi had the internet when they were first starting out, and what they could have done,
Yeah.
and how power to the people they could have gotten.
Right.
If their word of mouth was such that over the years, 13 songs have sold 3 million copies,
Mm.
and even like Repeaters sold 500,000 plus just on word of mouth back then when you were still on paper
Yeah.
and
Analog.
yeah, and they weren't even getting on MTV, so
Yeah.
it was all zines,
Yeah. Independent
basically.
fanzines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was all zines, and they were able to get big on that with the word of mouth. Now add the internet to it, and imagine what would have happened.
Right.
So okay, so there's that. The second variable I call power and passion.
Hmm.
Fugazi's music was dynamic and loud and exciting and gutturally emotional. They also used it as a form to express political anger and fear at the powers that be in both the government and the music business. Ian MacKay and Guy Picciotto were both incredible post-punk vocalists who absolutely laid it all on the fucking line with every performance. Their emphasis on rhythm and noise art, the band, with guitars, influenced their peers in both the underground and breaking out onto the radio. So not only did they influence the alternative rock of the early and mid 1990s, as we've discussed, the Pearl Jams and all of that, but their intensity also inspired the harder edged emo bands of the turn of the century,
Right. Right.
like At the Drive-In and You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead.
Yes. Very influenced by Fugazi.
Both hugely influenced by Fugazi, but even
Unwound.
yeah,
Unwound. Big time.
Unwound. Yeah, big time. But even later bands like My Chemical Romance, even though they're mostly offensively terrible, they still embrace the abrasive passion that
Right.
was Fugazi's trademark. And really between his work in Fugazi and his previous work in the great rites of spring, Guy Picciotto perhaps deserves the title of the godfather of emo.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would say that that's kind of an influence there. And then then the third variable is purpose,
Right.
purpose and message. And they, like obviously with some of the stuff they did on that first record, like you said, having a song about sexism from the woman's point of view,
Mm.
and stuff like that, and some of the missives that they had towards the music business, and about about drugs, and about and about the leadership of the country, and just all this other stuff. They just had a lot to say, and they said it with such conviction.
Yeah.
Obviously a huge influence on Pearl Jam, as we've said. Obviously, I think Green Day was hugely influenced by that
Sure.
eventually.
Sure.
Like when like Billy Joe Armstrong comes out with American Idiot,
Yeah.
and some of that stuff. And so I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of other bands that got political as well in the alternative scene of the 90s and
Rage
all of
Against the
that.
Machine.
Rage
Oh,
Against
and
the
Death.
Machine, yeah, obviously
Yeah.
big time influenced by Fugazi in their aesthetic and in their
Yeah.
mission. And so, basically, they kind of showed that rock and roll and punk and post-hardcore could be viscerally meaningful and have something to say and have a platform and really shake things up and really fuck things up.
Right.
And again, so a lot of the bands that followed, like even Nine Inch Nails in a way, was kind of influenced by Fugazi in terms of that, pain and passion, and power and message and kind of the idea of building a cult based on your worldview.
Yeah.
So I think Fugazi had a huge influence on that over the next 35 years after it. So there you go. So control of the music and of your destiny, the power and passion of the music, and the purpose and the message with which that music contained. There you go. What do you
Perfect.
say? What do you
That ends
say?
it. Yeah. And you also we also ran through a lot of the big name bands that they influenced and still in a way still kind of do. I mean, I've been posting videos, live footage of Fugazi on our Facebook page. And basically, it's all like, people's own home videos of Fugazi shows. So it's not the best sound quality in the world, but you get a good sense of how good they were and how great they were actually live and really really entertaining band to watch because Guy Picciotto was a live wire as a performer, and
Yeah,
they kind of needed that because the rest of the other three guys were pretty stoic. But
yeah,
one of the videos I posted, one of the comments, I mean, it just kind of says it all, and on the comment section of one of the videos, it says, yeah, I love Fugazi. I love you, man. I wish you would come back. We need you now more than ever. And that says a lot.
hmm
We need bands like Fugazi now more than ever.
yeah,
We need a 21st century version of that. The music, yeah, but the most important part, the message and the purpose. A band
yeah,
with that kind of message and that kind of purpose that connects with so many people. We need them now more than ever. We need that kind of band now more than ever to
yeah.
go up against everything that we're facing now, with corporate greed and rising fascism and just everything and just it's just everything. We need bands like Fugazi now more than ever. It
Yeah.
needs to be done. And the younger and hopefully there's a younger generation kind of a version of Fugazi coming. I don't know. Are we ever going to get
Yeah.
it? I don't know. I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. The weird thing is the closest thing we have to Fugazi right now is probably OCs.
The OCs. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean they're a little weird, but in terms of they have purpose and passion, and their last album, the one that they just came out with earlier in the year,
It's good. Really good.
has a lot to say about the dissolution of society and about the existential threat of AI and of war.
Yeah.
So maybe we have them, but they're a little old too.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
we need a
mean,
young band. Maybe Laurel Canyon can get political because they might be the best young rock band in the country.
maybe Geese.
Yeah, yeah. Although I mean,
If they
well,
get a
yeah,
political conscience.
yeah. If Geese got more political, it'd be interesting though, because like Cameron Winter is such a unusual singer.
Yeah.
Could you imagine him getting political with like, oh, you
It's like
know?
a cross. Yeah, hearing that voice of his cross between Tom York, Al Jolson, and a drunk Van Morrison.
Yeah, yeah. I know. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So anyway, folks, that's our run through Fugazi. Glad you can enjoy it. We'll have our Spotify playlist on it, and so yeah, definitely rediscover them and let us know what you think. Okay, well that said, Art was talking about our Facebook fabulous curmudgeonly community. We encourage you all to join that community. It's invite only, but chances are we'll let you in. Find us at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeonrock. Lots of good stuff that Art posts up there, and we have our frequent flyer contributors and also listeners. So hello, everybody. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Fugazi, especially younger people listening to us. And we know that at least Arturo's got several friends that are young that listen to us, and so we'd be interested to hear your perspective on Fugazi and hearing them for the first time and how they resonate to you as young folks. And so send us fan mail at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. And as I said, well, there'll be a Spotify playlist. No mystery. I'm going to dump all 7, or I guess you could say it's 7 albums or eight recordings. We're going to dump them all into a Spotify playlist. You'll be able to access that through our episode description on Apple or Amazon or Stitcher or wherever else you're accessing your podcast, and listen to all of this amazing music. And so it'll probably make this discussion even richer when you listen to it. So look out for that. And so dig it.